Mark Jennings is from the South End Licensed Taxi Drivers Association, Secretary of the South End Taxi Cooperative, in the studio with me. Tony Cox is responsible for transport at South End Borough Council, and Fred Jones is from Uber and joins us now on the line. Fred, hopefully we've got a better line with you, and then we will go to Tony Cox if we may. So you've been listening to what Mark Jennings is saying, is that you're not licensed to work in Essex. You can't do it.
Well, a private hire driver can pick up and drop off anywhere in the UK as long as booking is made through the operator licence that matches the driver and vehicle licence. That's the law. It's very clear. It's been like that for a long time.
You're wrong.
And so we're fully compliant. And if you think about it kind of sensibly, if you live in Southend, you just come back from holiday, landed at Heathrow, you want to call a local cab firm, you can. They can come and pick you up and then take you home. That's outside their licensed jurisdiction. You're not going to wait for a driver to go all the way back to Southend and then come all the way back to Heathrow to pick you up. So, there's nothing really controversial here, and we're licensed in over 60 jurisdictions across the UK and Ireland.
You don't know what you're talking about.
And fully compliant with all current legislation.
Well,
you don't know what you're talking about, Fred.
He does, though, Mark, doesn't he?
No, he doesn't. He absolutely doesn't.
Well, in what way?
In the acts that I read earlier, in the spirit of the law, he's saying that he can go and work wherever he likes in the country just by being licensed by one borough.
Fred?
Well, we're licensed in over 70 jurisdictions, so all the major cities and towns, over 20 of them now in the UK.
Yeah, and your area, Fred, that you've got on Uber's site that you distinguish for London goes from Reading to Dover. Can you tell me that Dover is inside the London area? So you're telling me that just because you're licensed for London, you can cover Dover, 78 miles away?
Fred, is that the case?
Well, look, we're a hugely popular service now, so many people,
not by me,
over 2 million people every week rely on us to get around for a safe, affordable ride.
And you're breaking the law.
Taking trips home from, if you live in London, to Dover, or one of the many other cities and towns that we operate in around the UK. There's nothing controversial about this. We're fully licensed.
Can you tell me, Fred, can you tell me
in the UK,
that under Section D of the Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1976, Section 46, subsection 1, paragraph D, no person shall in a controlled district operate any vehicle as a private hire vehicle without having a current licence under Section 55 of this Act. Have you actually read this Act?
Now, let's bring in, if I may, because this gentleman is responsible for transport at Southend Borough Council and is listening to you two gentlemen disagreeing with each other. But Tony Cox, your thoughts on this? You're hearing the arguments here. I mean, who is right?
I think, Sadie, you said one word earlier, confusion. And what I'm calling upon, really, is the government to actually introduce a set of legislation that takes away any ambiguity within the law. Now, there was an incident, for example, I'm going to add something further into the mix here, brought to my attention that there was a driver who now works for Uber, who's licensed by TfL, has his vehicle licensed by TfL, and also has a individual licence with TfL. Nothing wrong with that in the law. However, he did have all those three licences with Southend Borough Council and actually had those licences removed because he failed the fit and proper persons test. Not mentioning the name, but in this case, the driver was found guilty of actually speeding offences and then passing the speeding offences on to other people. What that then meant was Southend Council revoked all these licences. He then went to work for Uber and to be licensed under TfL and could now come into Southend and pick up passengers. Now that for me feels inherently wrong.
Fred Jones, may we ask you, what checks do you do? Are you disappointed to hear that this driver is now driving in Southend?
Well, yeah, I think the situation that highlighted there just shows the need for greater collaboration between councils and national standards. Every time a driver is licensed, whether it's by TfL or, in fact, any council, they have to pass the fit and proper persons test, and that requires going through all the necessary background checks, enhanced DBS checks, etc., and any local test. So we rely on the councils to assess whether a driver is fit and proper. And obviously to do that, they need to have access to all the correct information. So I think the call there for a greater move towards national standards to further improve safety is a good one, and one that Uber's fully supportive of. And we're constantly seeking to raise standards in the industry with the checks that we carry out.
Can I just interject there?
Of course you
If you
can.
want to raise national standards, there's another act you need to read, and it's last year, Deregulation Act 2015, Section 11, it purports to 55A. And it is a national standard now that an operator, such as yourselves, if he wishes to take a job in another area, you then have to sub that job out to an operator in another area under the operator's licence. You're not doing that.
You're correct. We don't subcontract bookings between operators.
No, you don't.
So, Tony, this has got to be sorted out. I mean, the taxi drivers are obviously upset about this. Uber just want to do a job. People are saying, why are taxi drivers cross about this? Is it just because, there's going to be increased competition out there? Maybe prices are coming down?
We're not worried about the competition. What we would like to see is any private hire company that wishes to operate in another area to play by the rules. If I want to go into London, I've got to get an operator's licence, a driver's licence and a vehicle licence. Why can't he do the same in my area?
Tony?
I think for me, and this is where I go back to my earlier point, what I cannot understand is if you take in Fred's point that as long as they hold all three licences under one jurisdiction, they can work anywhere in the country. What then that begs the question is, why have other operators' licence in other major towns and cities across the country? If you can apply the law on that basis, then there won't be a need for Uber to actually get any other operators' licences across the country. Now, for me, that is where the confusion is, where I think I understand Mark's point. It all determines on where the driver is actually based. Now, I'm no lawyer or no solicitor, and that's why I've asked my own legal team in Southend to actually look at this. Because, as I say, the incident that we had, because this is where the Uber app is actually very good, because it shows the physical location of the driver at the time a person makes that booking. Now, in that case that I mentioned earlier, that driver was nowhere near the TfL operated area. He was actually based in Southend when someone made that booking. I feel decidedly uncomfortable in the fact that someone who Southend Council didn't deem fit to actually transport members of the public could be based in Southend, not in London, because of his location on the app, to then go and take a customer. And that, I feel, is morally wrong.
Fred Jones, how can you stop this happening?
Well, look, we hold like I said, we're licensed in over 60 jurisdictions. So
but this driver wasn't. I mean, this driver wasn't. This driver had it refused in Southend, and there he was picking up people.
He can stop this happening. He can turn, in Brighton, Uber turned the app off a month after they applied for their operator's licence because a driver turned up on the app in Brighton. Brighton Council rang Uber. They by their own volition turned themselves off in the Brighton area. You could not see a car on the app in Brighton up until last Friday at 4 o'clock when they turned it back on, because their operator's licence that operator's licence runs out tomorrow and they've renewed it. Now, hold on. Uber can do that. They could do that. There is no
but
need.
Maybe people want it in Southend, though. Maybe people are thinking,
Then let them get an operator's licence and play by the rules that I have to play by. Why they can turn that app off. They don't have to advertise the fact they've got vehicles in the area.
Would you do that, Fred?
And there's another law. Do you want me to go on to the Criminal and Justice and Public Order Act of 94?
No more laws. Because I know that there are laws there, but as Tony says, the laws have got to be made clearer. And
They're clear. They are clear. They're just not being adhered to. And it drives us up the wall that we have to follow them, and they don't.
Well, I'm going to let you all go, but thank you very much indeed. Tony Cox, who is responsible for transport at Southend Borough Council. We'd be interested, Tony, as to what actually gets done on this, and what your lawyers and your law people there come up with. Please let us know, won't you, Tony?
I will say, if I can make one final point, is I'm not against Uber per se, as long as they are licensed correctly and appropriately within the law. And actually, I think you're right. I don't think this is about preventing anybody from competition. Competition is actually good for the public in the sense that they can actually get services at prices in a safe manner. And I think that has to be welcomed, but it has to be done within the law.
Well, maybe Southend licenses should also get an app and be able to use that. You got one?
We've got
well,
apps.
There we go. Well, thank you very much indeed as well, Fred Jones, for joining me from Uber. And thank you so much for coming in, Mark Jennings. I think the argument will obviously go on. I know not enough about it, but I'll open it up to you. Have you ever used Uber? Do you like to know where your taxis are from and where they're licensed to? Does it matter, or is it just whoever's the cheapest? 0300 200 40 41. Thank you very much indeed. Get your calls in now.